Howdy, everybody, and welcome to our first Sierra Forum of the year. I'm Jason Mark. I'm the editor-in-chief of Sierra Magazine, and I'm the sometime host of these discussions, which gives Sierra Club members and supporters like you all a chance to hear directly from our staff members and our allies about the work that we're doing to protect clean air, clean water, a stable climate, and wildlands. And I'm coming to you from beautiful Bellingham, Washington, which is the traditional homelands of the Lummi and Nooksack peoples. Like usual, we're going to do about 20 to 30 minutes of discussion, and then we'll leave plenty of time for Q&As. If you've got a question today for any of the panelists, drop it in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to get to as many of them as possible. So in case you missed it, yesterday was Climate Day at the Biden White House. And make no mistake, the only reason there was a Climate Day at the White House is because of the environmental movement and the work that you all helped to do to elect the most climate ambitious administration in history. One with a diverse and tested cabinet that's ready to put us on the path towards hopefully a much better future, as well as a whole host of climate champions holding the majority now in both houses of Congress. Well, yeah, I think as we all know, 2021 brought some new challenges and had a rough start. It also represents a really exciting fresh start with a unique opportunity. And there's already so much happening. So we want to share with you the best thinking from the Sierra Club leadership on our priorities and opportunities for the coming year. So today we have our executive director, Mike Brune. Also here is Leslie Fields. She's the National Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Legal for the Sierra Club. And Melinda Pierce. She's our legislative director. So Mike, Leslie, and Melinda, thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Awesome to be here.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, Mike, let's start with you. I just would love to hear your outlook, kind of your big picture outlook for 2021.
Sure. Well, first, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining this call and tuning in. As you heard, I'm Mike Brune. I'm the executive director for the Sierra Club. You can use he, him, and his pronouns for me. And I'm here in Northern California, which is Ohlone territory in the Bay Area. And before I talk about the outlook for 2021, let me also just say thank you. I know that there were millions of us, tens of millions of us, who worked as hard as we could to get to this point for a really long time, but in particular last year. And I know that the Sierra Club made defeating Donald Trump our top priority in 2020. And many of the folks who are on this call, you wrote letters, you made phone calls, you made donations, you sent text messages, you did all of the above and often a whole lot more. So this is your victory. And I hope that you feel really good about where we are right now. And I just wanted to start by saying thank you for all of your support and your hope and your hard work. So if I were to give an outlook for 2021, if I were to give a weather outlook for 2021, I would say it is mostly sunny, mostly sunny. Clearly we have an administration that is going for it, that has made addressing the climate crisis and the economic crisis and the pandemic and systemic racism a top priority, and to do so at the scale and the speed and with the level of ambition that's required. And to do that, as Jason said, with appointments and nominations of people who are competent and experienced and who know how to get the work done. So that combination of ambition and specificity and competence is precisely what we need to achieve systemic and dramatic change. And look, we've had 4 years, not just of being stalled, but of going backwards in a lot of different areas as things have gotten a lot worse across the economy, across the planet, with our climate, but also for the real world effects that people are suffering through. So from our perspective, this is the year to get things done. Before we get entangled in midterm elections, while we still have the momentum that is inherent in this new election, this is our chance to pass legislation that will advance clean energy and hold polluters accountable, to institute a series of executive actions that will move us dramatically forward in terms of replacing fossil fuels and toxic chemicals with clean energy alternatives, but to do all of this work in a way that benefits in measurable and meaningful ways the communities that have been suffering for far too long, and to make sure that as we phase out fossil fuel leasing on federal lands across the country, we're doing this in a way that works for communities. As we transition off of coal completely over the next decade, we're doing this in a way that alleviates the pollution burden for those who have been breathing dirty air and drinking unclean water for far too long, but also locks in those communities to the clean energy, the economic benefits of a clean energy transition. And doing all of this in ways that shore up our democracy and address the divisions that have been plaguing our country for a long time. So I say mostly sunny because there's so much that's good out there, and we have an entrenched opposition. We have an entrenched, well-organized and well-funded opposition that can't ever be taken for granted. We know that our solutions can bring people together. We know that we have political momentum, and now what we need more than anything else is to come together to advance these solutions.
Thanks so much, Mike. Can folks hear me? Having a little bit of technical difficulties. Thanks, Mike, for that overview. I know you mentioned it sort of briefly. I want to hand it over to Leslie real quick. During his inauguration, President Biden said that democracy was tested and democracy prevailed. And at the same time, we know it was pretty tight there. And there's a lot of work to do moving forward. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the first piece of legislation to be introduced in this Congress, HR 1, why it's so important, why the Sierra Club supports it, and how this package of democracy reforms fits into our work of protecting and defending the environment.
Thanks so much, Jason. And great to be here with my good colleagues, Michael and Melinda. And it's a great question. So HR 1 is the For the People Act. And many of the critical issues that our nation faces, combating the climate crisis, making sure that everyone has health care, creating good paying, family wage sustaining jobs, ending and achieving racial justice, can't be addressed while we have a broken democracy. And so HR 1 is why it's the number one. It is basically expands access to the ballot box by taking on institutional barriers to voting, including terrible voter registration systems, disenfranchisement, such as limited voting hours. And we really saw that this cycle, and we also saw the problems in Georgia and other states. And so HR 1 creates an automatic voter registration across the country, ensures individuals who have completed felony sentences have their full voting rights restored, expands early voting, and enhances absentee voting, simplifies voting by mail. And so we really need to have this overall package to make sure that everyone who is eligible to vote votes and is not intimidated and is not going to have a problem to vote. And we saw unprecedented numbers voting this cycle. People took their lives in their hands and voted during a pandemic. And in some places, in Georgia, more than once at the same time, right after another. So we really want to promote integrity in the voting process. We want to ensure security in the voting process. And so our Great Democracy Program, led by our colleague Courtney Height, has really been very involved with the very important coalitions to make sure that HR 1 becomes law.
Thanks so much for that, Leslie. It's obviously super important, and we can't have a healthy democracy. We can't have a healthy environment without a healthy and vibrant democracy. There's already a bunch of questions here in the chat about specific pieces of legislation. I don't think we want to go through them all, but Melinda, I'm wondering if you could talk about some kind of top line items and really what are the overall priorities for the Sierra Club legislatively.
Sure, thanks. And thank you, Leslie and Mike, and thank you all for tolerating our business casual, which is now to a new low here remotely. It's pretty exciting, the change that happened as a result of the Georgia elections. And where Mike says it's mostly sunny on the administrative front, certainly, I'm tempered a little bit. There's probably sun and a chance of clouds here because what the Democratic majority means. Even though Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have the gavel in hand, that narrow majority is not going to allow for the passage of the bold, sweeping legislative initiatives that we really need to see. What it does make it easier to do, and what looked really cloudy before Georgia, is allow Biden to populate his government with the kind of talent and expertise that he has put forward. It is a slate of cabinet members, diverse, just a level of expertise from all walks of life that really is a dream team and a green cabinet. And so when you think about first items of business on Capitol Hill, confirming his nominees is one of the things that's happening already. And we will see other key appointments, for example, DOI, EPA, DOE. Those nominees come up for a full vote in the Senate before we have to delve into impeachment that could start as early as February 9th. So I'll pause there. First order of business I see in the Senate, confirmation of these nominees, and then the interregnum of a impeachment trial. And we can talk a little bit more about other content, Jason, as we go forward.
Well, yeah, I guess this would be a follow-up. I want to respond to somebody. We got so many questions coming in. So thanks so much to the listeners and viewers for being so engaged. But while we're on this question, this would be, I guess, either for you, Leslie, or you, Melinda. Harvey wants to know, like, what can be done and what is the administration doing to, as Harvey puts it, repair the damage done to places like Interior, Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, and expresses concern that the Trump administration packed a lot of lower positions and deputies and other posts on the way out the door. So I'm wondering if one of you guys could answer that question, just like, what's the repair work that can be done in some of those key federal agencies that oversee lands, waters, and drilling and stuff like that?
Oh, it's such a good point. And let me start, and my colleagues can pile on. What happened during the Trump administration to purge talent and expertise from critical agencies like Department of Interior, scientists at EPA, at USGS, was probably the greatest damage, if you look across what Trump's legacy is, that I can see. And a critical challenge for the Biden administration is to repopulate the ranks. And I think he is attracting some of the highest level extraordinary leaders to some of those appointments that are really going to attract the talent and the expertise that we need to populate the agencies. And so I agree, restoring government is a huge thing before us. Others?
Well, I would just add, I would totally agree with Melinda, and it is an excellent question. I mean, the Biden administration has been in for 8 days, and so they are moving very quickly. Some of the secretaries or the administrator for EPA, he has not been confirmed yet either. So they are going quick step, but there are a lot of positions. And I think that we should encourage yourselves out there, our friends, our colleagues, to apply for these positions. We need to get good people in there. So if you know of someone really great, or yourself, get on the website and Build Back Better, I think .com and .gov, sorry, and put your information in there. So we need to get good people in there, and it's going to take a little time, but I think they're moving as quickly as possible on this.
Leslie, thank you so much for that reality check that we are in day 8, and while we have big ambitions and a lot of work to do, this is still just this is early days.
It feels like it's been a while, right? But it's still day 8. So yeah,
it's going to take a little while to detox. I think the whole country
right.
needs detox from the Trump administration. Mike, I was going to ask you about this anyway, but somebody here in the chat's got a question about, I think it maybe was Vicky, or I'm sorry, I didn't get the name. About one of the things that the Biden White House did yesterday in its executive order, which was setting a goal and echoing the goal that's already come from the conservation movement about preserving 30% of lands and waters by 2030. So this, I'm sorry, it's actually anonymous. Anonymous would like to know if you could talk a little bit about the Sierra Club's position on that, and maybe talk a little bit more about what is 30 by 30 for people who've not heard that before.
Sure, happy to do that. Let me just first kind of add to the comments on the last question about the filling of these agencies with competent people, and to share a little bit of good news. I guess what I would say is that every single Biden appointee or White House employee that I've talked to at all levels have identified this as a top concern. They've identified it as a priority. They have been angered, just like all of us, over the last 4 years at the purge that's been happening in these agencies, or people getting reassigned or muzzled in different ways. And so this is a top priority for everybody that we have talked with inside the administration. And there's enormous attention being brought to this issue. And the second thing I wanted to say is just that the people who worked in these agencies are competent and fierce, and they have held out. They have been there. They have been doing hard work in toxic circumstances, helping to protect science as best that they can and protect public input and protect our laws and our democracy. These are the quiet, often unknown and unsung heroes, and they're still there. And they are now liberated to do the work that they really need to do. So I wanted to share that just because the way I feel is that we should be concerned about this, focused on it, but not devastated at the damage that's been done, because we're gonna quickly recover from the last administration in this regard. However, or anyway, to talk about the question about 3030, this is a key priority for the Sierra Club. It's a key priority for environmental organizations and Native communities and community groups all around the world. The basic idea comes from conservation biologists, as well as Native leaders who have said nature needs half. We ought to be able to set aside, through public lands and private lands, indigenous reserves, traditionally held territories, at least half of the lands and waters on our planet to conserve biodiversity, to uphold the rights of communities and Native people, to determine what is happening within their territories. And we ought to be setting aside from industrial development at least half of nature all around the world, and to do that by 2050. What we have set collectively around the world, organizations have set, is an interim goal of protecting 30%. Each country would protect 30% of our lands and waters by 2030. We are, if I'm remembering correctly, at about 12% collectively right now. And the Biden administration, to its great credit, set as a clear goal, an explicit identified priority, to do everything that it could to make sure that the US would hit its goal of 30 by 30 by taking early executive action. And so we were thrilled that the administration made this a priority. We were doubly thrilled that it wasn't just a campaign promise that evaporated off of a campaign website, but that promise was translated into the transition team. And then yesterday, on day 7 of the new administration, it was articulated as a priority. And now government agencies are all charged with coming up with clear strategies and clear plans on how we will achieve that goal. This will be led by the Department of the Interior, but all agencies are required to contribute to the solutions and a process to actually make sure that we're reaching that goal. We and many others will be working with the administration to both shape the goal, shape the actions that are necessary, and to think through how we can do this on both public lands and private lands. And I would say a down payment on that was the announcement yesterday of a moratorium on new oil and gas leasing on federal lands and waters, as well as the initiation of a review across all agencies for all fossil fuels and future leases. So a temporary moratorium, and then a review on what should be happening permanently. It's one of the most important things that the federal government can do, and this administration did it in the first week, so we're pretty encouraged.
Thanks so much, Mike. That was a really great overview of 3030 and nature needs half and why it's so important. While we're on the subject of the Interior Department, because there's a couple questions in the chat about this, I don't know if either Leslie or Melinda, you want to tackle this. Any thoughts about Deb Holland? There's a couple people who want to know kind of Sierra Club's thoughts about this really historic nomination, the first Indigenous person nominated for a cabinet position, and no less in the Interior Department. which, a century or plus ago, essentially, had a policy of genocide of Native Americans. Anything you guys want to share about the Holland nominations? I was like, Leslie, maybe do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, well, it's totally historic, and we support it and her, and we are hoping that she becomes confirmed, and we believe that she'll put in a great team. But I mean, yeah, it brought tears to my eyes when she was nominated, and so I think that it is a huge development, and for not for all of us in the country, and also for environmental justice throughout Indian country and the rest of the country. And so, and Melinda is, deeply involved, and we have other great staff who've been very involved in the Interior Department, like Ethan Manuel and others out there with our chapters. I'm sure they feel the same way.
Just
So
one
there's,
add on, Jason. It's interesting. It feels like Department of Interior historically mission of protect and the Indian trust lands and the tribal agenda has always played second fiddle. And I think this is a wonderful affirmation to lift up that major part of Department of Interior's mission.
Melinda, I want to keep it for you. First of all, thank you guys so much for all of these great questions. We're doing our best to get to as many of them as possible. People have got a lot of questions about specific legislation. I don't think we're going to be able to get into all of those, but everything from Migratory Bird Act to climate legislation to all sorts of stuff. And a couple of folks are wondering, is there like an easy clearinghouse either on our website or by joining the email list where people can sort of see like this Sierra Club tracker of things we support and object to? Or is there an easy resource that people could tap into if they've got questions about specific legislation? For either Leslie or Melinda.
Absolutely. And then, connecting with the Sierra Club's federal policy team, we're sort of the holders of, the legislation that we're working on. We do a weekly tracker where we're looking at bills that are being introduced and monitoring the process through the committee and onto the floors. And then on our website, we should transfer some of the information from Campfire to make that more public, as some of these bills that we care about are reintroduced, like Keep It in the Ground or Ending Fossil Fuel Subsidies, Wilderness for the Arctic, 100% clean energy. It's broad, it's voluminous, and we'll make a real commitment this year to capture that on the website so that, folks can track it.
TBD on that one, but that's super important. We want to make sure that we're providing members and supporters with all the information they need to be effective advocates. Just because we have a couple questions in here, and you just mentioned it, Melinda, people do want to know what did happen with the Arctic lease sales in the final days of the Trump administration, and kind of next steps on protecting the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge.
Sure, I'll do my best. I think it was January 5th or something. Was the rushed lease sale for tracts within the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. They sold, I believe, 11 tracts, didn't raise a lot of money, and that has always been an argument. America needs this money to the federal government from the sale of these leases. And yet, Biden, on day one, put a pause and halted further action on leasing and permitting. And so we were really at the cusp of seeing some of these companies roll into the coastal plain, start seismic testing, and exercise their leases through permits. And Biden closed the door on that. And that's the kind of EO that has immediate effect, much like the revocation of the Keystone Pipeline, the permit.
And the EO's executive order. I know that was something that we were litigating on. Leslie, you direct and oversee the Sierra Club's environmental law program. Obviously, it's been a very busy 4 years of watchdogging, of trying to make sure that bedrock environmental laws like the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts and the Endangered Species Act, that the Trump administration was abiding by those. What happens now to things that we were, a good example would be Sierra Club v. Trump, which was our case against the construction of the border wall and what we claimed was an unconstitutional use of funds to do that. Like, what happens to some of this litigation now with a new administration?
This is a great question. And I want to say that our ELP program is one of the best in the world. I want to also go right back to that huge win that the Keystone Pipeline had been rescinded, those cross-border permits. And ELP was instrumental in preventing the pipeline from being built for 4 years. There were at least 5 Keystone legal challenges filed, 2 federal lawsuits on the approvals from the Department of State, Army Corps of Engineers, and that barred pipeline construction. And it helped protect, that hard work helped protect the waterways, slowed the development of greenhouse gas intensive tar sands, and defended the sovereignty of tribes and indigenous allies. So that is something to celebrate. Trump v. Sierra Club is no more. And so that's very exciting. And that got pulled down. And there are a number of other cases such as that are being filed, such as, we still have a lot of work to do. And I'll just mention a few, such as a federal lawsuit challenging this EPA's decision to adopt dust lead clearance standards that would leave kids at risk for lead poisoning, even after abatement activities. And we usually co-counsel with other organizations such as Earth Justice. In Florida, there's a lawsuit challenging Trump's delegation of authority under Section 404 of Clean Water Act, state of Florida. Another important case is a lawsuit challenging an unlawful EPA rule that seeks to delay urgently needed clean air standards required by this burdensome cost-benefit analysis. And another one is a lawsuit that we're challenging that was going to hamstring EPA's ability to adopt essential public health protections by limiting this agency's scientific research. So there's a number of things that have to be cleaned up, and there are a number of things that we are proposing, and it's a very busy docket. Again, our environmental law program is very good about they're keeping their website up to date. If folks want more information, to please go on the website and just sierraclub.org/environmental law.
Sorry, thanks for that, Leslie. And it's kind of incredible. Folks should know, just seeing we were all back in physical offices, all of those lawyers running around seem like they're juggling chainsaws all the time. So it's incredible the work they do. A lot of questions, not surprisingly, here about fracking, fracking for gas. And I'm wondering, Mike, maybe you can take this on. Someone points out that, yeah, it's great that there's a moratorium on federal lands, but a lot of fracking happens on private lands. What is the Sierra Club trying to do to watchdog fracking? And in general, I think some questions about, how can we urge the Biden administration to be a little bit stronger on this question of gas extraction?
Sure. Well, let me first acknowledge what was said in the question, which is that the moratorium that was announced yesterday is for federal lands. It's for new leases on federal lands for oil and gas. And the review that would accompany that, which would address permanent solutions, is for all fossil fuels, but it's also on just federal lands. So state lands are not covered by that. It's profound in that 25% of emissions come from federal lands, and we've all been involved in iconic fights from the Arctic to the Gulf and places in between for those fights, but that's just a federal land body of work. Fracking is still happening on public lands, on state lands, or on state level lands, county lands sometimes, and often on private lands in states all across the country. So that problem still exists. this is a top priority for the Sierra Club. And so we are engaged in a comprehensive approach, both focusing on the place-based fights to stop stop the expansion of fracking into new communities, new states, or new communities within certain states, working with our chapters and local groups to make sure that fracking is not allowed where it's not happening, and to make sure that everything is being done where it is happening to increase the safeguards for air and water and climate protection. And then we're looking at it comprehensively by focusing on demand. Right now, there are more than 100 new gas plant proposals that are on the books all across the country. Sierra Club is fighting every one of those. There are dozens of additional natural gas pipelines that would connect from fracking facilities to the natural gas plants. We're fighting just about every one of those. There are more than 2,000 existing natural gas plants in the country today. We're not fighting all 2,000 of those yet because we're looking to expand our capacity to do that, but we're taking on many of them. And our goal is to not just stop the new gas plants from being built, stop new fossil fuel infrastructure from being built, but to retire the entire existing fleet of natural gas plants and replace that with clean energy. And there are 21 liquefied natural gas plant export terminals being proposed, where we're fracking in our own watersheds, building pipelines to take that fracked natural gas all the way off into the Gulf and then sending it to other countries with a carbon intensity that is even worse than coal. So at every point in the cycle, the Sierra Club, our volunteers, members, groups, and chapters are fighting every single piece of that fossil fuel infrastructure, as we also are fighting the site-based fights on fracking as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Mike. So it sounds like kind of top line is at once ratchet down demand and shut off supply and accelerate the transition to clean and renewable.
Yep.
We have a lot of questions here. I don't know who of you wants to tackle it about environmental justice. Yesterday's executive orders and it's sort of the whole government picture explicitly and had a lot of elements to it about environmental justice. So folks, I don't know who wants to tackle this. Can we talk a little bit about what was in yesterday's executive order, as well as what the Sierra Club is doing when it comes to the intersections between equity, justice, and the environment?
Happy to start off that. I want to say that the Sierra Club is very well positioned and has done a lot of work in environmental justice since the 90s. And I'm sure some of you folks who are listening have been involved in your communities for a very long time, and it makes such a difference. And so basically, and personally, it's almost a culmination of so much blood, sweat, and tears out there. And to hear, first off, have the access that communities had to the transition team when during the Biden transition process was critical. And then now that there's been an inauguration and that we have these executive orders that create first of its kind Environmental Justice Interagency Council. There is under Executive Order 12898, the executive order that many of you remember that President Clinton signed. There's an interagency working group, but there's also now going to be an interagency council to develop clear performance metrics to provide accountability. Installation of EJ officers in all the federal agencies, which is huge, to prepare a report of recommendations and how the Executive Order 12898 can be strengthened and updated. Creation of an external environmental justice council to identify reforms to achieve equity and inclusion in federal policy and ensuring EJ communities have a seat and voice at the table. And because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, and they've been on the menu for a long time. Orders the EPA to recommend to enforcing the nation's pollution law, especially those that impact communities of color. The enforcement issue has been critically deficient, and we want to make sure that there's disproportionate enforcement to the people who are disproportionately affected. And then there's a commitment of 40% of benefits from relevant federal investments targeted to communities impacted by cumulative pollution and environmental injustice. And so it is a huge day. It was a huge day yesterday. There's going to be more. And we are very happy and very proud that, and I'm very proud that Sierra Club has played a huge role in this issue. We have also in many chapters have been working on this issue for a very long time. Many community folks have been working on this issue for a very long time. Nationally, we've been co-signers to the Equitable and Just National Platform. Mike has been instrumental with that, as well as our great colleague Liz Pereira on the federal policy team, myself included. And that is an ongoing process. If you go to ajustclimate.org, you can see the 200 signatories of environmental groups, environmental justice groups, other organizations committing to how we relate to each other, how we work together, also supporting the resources and funding to environmental justice organizations that have not had the resources and have had discriminatory funding against them. So there's a lot, and we've had people in our organization who've been doing this for a very, very long time. So I am very happy about this and look forward to more to come. So I appreciate the interest, and I appreciate everybody's great support of environmental justice.
Thanks for that, Leslie. That was hugely comprehensive. And yeah, I think just goes without saying, yesterday was a hugely exciting day. I saw Robert Ballard, who's often called the kind of godfather or grandfather of the environmental justice movement, saying that yesterday felt like the culmination of 40 years of work. Leslie just kind of briefly mentioned that I think I heard the word cooperation and collaboration. There's a lot of questions here. And maybe this is sort of internal movement stuff, but it is important. Anybody wants to talk about how the Sierra Club is working with our partners in the environmental movement, the environmental justice movements, other movements? It can often feel like 1,000 points of light and a lot of disparate things happening. But there's like 2 or 3 questions here. People want to know how we are collaborating with other environmental organizations.
I can take a swing at that. Let me first build off of what Leslie was talking about, because that I think is at the root of a lot of the shifts that we're seeing inside the movement. And first, actually, let me just say, I know that there are folks in this call who have been active with the Sierra Club for decades, volunteering with the Sierra Club, being leaders inside the Sierra Club for many, many, many years, and who know Leslie really, really well. And some folks who are relatively new and who might not know her that, or any of us all that well at all. So just to say that we're in the presence of greatness on this call. Leslie has been a key leader inside the Sierra Club for more than a decade, and in particular has pushed and shaped our thinking and the way that we work and the way that we organize and what we advocate for and who we advocate with, both inside the Sierra Club and inside the movement. She's mostly too humble to take credit for that on this kind of a call, but she's been a powerful force inside the movement. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. And then also that our posture in doing this work inside the Sierra Club, particularly on environmental justice, is to be really encouraged and optimistic and hopeful and very hard to satisfy. That's the role that we see ourselves needing to play, that the commitments that we're seeing from this administration are historic and literally unprecedented and profound and wide-reaching and hard to implement, hard to put into practice, and hard to make sure that there are real, tangible, measurable benefits that are being delivered by communities. So to try to do that well, we have been restructuring the leadership within the environmental movement to transition from an environmental movement that was dominated by big national organizations like the Sierra Club and many others, to one that is much, much more collaborative, that really establishes deep relationships and deeper partnerships with smaller community-based organizations, environmental justice organizations, groups who may not work at all on federal policy, but who are really effective and focused on state or local policy, working with Native communities, working with conservatives, people who are working to protect lands and water and wildlife, but who may not identify as a Democrat or a progressive, but share many, though not all, of the values of folks who work at the Sierra Club. And so that new leadership structure that's been put into place over the last couple of years and is in place now gives us an opportunity to build a broader base, to put solutions that are more durable, hopefully to build more public support for this, for a set of solutions that will benefit all Americans, not just a few. And that's been a profound shift. And I guess the final thing I will say is that one of the things that was a big surprise to me when I came to the Sierra Club was how well groups tend to partner with each other. Sometimes, there's competition for who gets quoted in the New York Times, or there may be competition for a particular donor, but behind the scenes, it's actually pretty good. We coordinate really tightly on our litigation strategies. We coordinate how we're responding to certain developments, and we coordinate on strategy for both the short term and the long term. And it's something that brought me a lot of comfort when I first came to the Sierra Club. And our challenge now is to bring more people in together into an alignment around a set of ambitious goals.
Thanks so much for that, Leslie and Mike. Melinda, anything you want to add?
No, I just want to celebrate my colleagues here in terms of their diligence and intentionality as they try and bridge, collaborate with a broader set of groups and partners, and recognizing that that's what's going to take to win. We can't just be the narrow green group anymore. The challenges are intersectional, and so these kinds of collaborations are essential.
Thanks, you guys. And again, just thank you to everybody who's participating. I looked at these questions and I just want to say the depth and breadth of your knowledge about different environmental issues and policies, and the intensity of your passion really comes through. So I also feel like we're in the presence of greatness with all these great participants who have got fantastic questions here. And I'm trying to pull out common threads I'm seeing. And one I'm seeing, this is an ongoing oil and gas infrastructure fight, is around Line 3 in Minnesota. Folks have not heard about that. It's an oil and gas conduit that's going through Minnesota, and there's a lot of on the ground indigenous-led opposition to that. Folks, I think, want to know what, if anything, the Sierra Club is doing to support the Line 3 resistors and the water defenders there, and what, if anything, we know about the Biden administration's take on that project.
Well, I'll just start. The North Star chapter is very engaged in this, and I strongly suggest that people get in touch with them. And they have great knowledge on these fights, and they have great partnerships and allyships with these communities. And so that would be a place to start. The North Star, Margaret Levin is the chapter director, and they are really, really great on this, and I know are having ongoing strategy as we speak on Line 3, with also our Dirty Fuels program.
And I'll just layer on that it was incredibly exciting that day one, Biden announced the revocation of the permit for KXL. And that was such an energizing moment for our pipeline activists around the country that are working on Line 3 or DAPL and Keystone, et cetera, that having success with Keystone, which was such a lightning rod, I think is inspiring and reinvigorating our pipeline activists around the country, those working on Line 3 as well.
So I've seen a couple. First of all, thank you guys so much for that. And I just want to echo that. Please go check out the great work of the North Star chapter and the Sierra Club's Beyond Dirty Fuels and Beyond Oil campaigns. And I think we put a link in the group chat there to how you can learn more about the Sierra Club's Beyond Oil and Beyond Dirty Fuels work. This one can seem kind of wonky, sort of in the weeds, but there's a couple questions here about infrastructure and things like the electric grid. Which again can seem sort of nerdy or esoteric, but are hugely important about this transition. So I think the question, if I were to sum it up, is sort of what is the Sierra Club doing? And I guess then, what can and should the Biden administration and Congress do to make sure that we're taking care of stuff like, modernizing our electric grid and changing the way that we get around and move things and people. And maybe similarly, we're going to piggyback on that. And this one might be specifically for Leslie. People do want to know the latest on the Green New Deal and where the Sierra Club is on that. So I know those are kind of somewhat separate but connected, but let's try to tackle both of them if we could.
I can start. In a few weeks, President Biden's going to release a massive economic recovery package. And this is going to be a huge vehicle for advancing our climate equity and jobs priorities to get the Thrive agenda moving, which is the transform, heal, and renew by investing in vibrant economy. And that's, we've kind of lifted up the Green New Deal movement. And we are to back, to put millions of people back to work on an economy that prioritizes racial and economic justice and clean energy alternatives. And Schumer was on Maddow on MSNBC talking about this just this week. And so it is coming. And the Sierra Club is very involved with the Living Economy program. We just hired a director of labor and economic justice who starts on Monday. And so we are really going to be engaged in this. And Mike and Lynn, I'm sure have more to add.
I'm just going to quickly jump in there. We've got at least 2 questions. People want to know, what is the Sierra Club doing to help communities transition, right?
Yeah.
To
I'm sorry.
those coal communities, those gas and oil communities, like
right.
What can we do to assist and be in solidarity with those communities and those workers?
There's also an organizing call about Thrive coming on Tuesday. So look out for that on the website. And
so
I missed.
Sorry, were you going?
No, go ahead.
So what I would say about I guess, Jason, I heard you kind of talk about 2 aspects of the infrastructure. Like one is like the mechanical, the physical, electrical grid. There are questions about that. And then the human infrastructure around the communities that have been producing our energy for a really long time. So what I would say is that we have been working on that for years, mostly at the local level, because that's where we've seen where we've had an ability to have a real impact. So on the physical side, in terms of getting coal and increasingly gas and nuclear power off the grid, kind of in that order, we've been doing a lot of work, both to obviously close coal plants, replace them with clean energy, but then our law program and our organizers and our local advocates have been working diligently in more than 100 locations to make sure that as clean energy comes online, it's matched to the demand. So this entails a whole bunch of really detailed and fairly wonky fights about how electricity rates should be set and designed, how people can be compensated for having solar panels on the roof of their houses or their apartments, or wind turbines on their property, or battery storage in their garages, how people can be compensated for having renewable energy resources at their disposal, and how we can integrate thousands of different sources of renewable energy into a grid while ensuring reliability. Sierra Club has been advocating on that for a really long time and is deeply engaged. Now that we have an administration that's saying we got to get off all fossil fuels off the grid by 2035, if not sooner, that work, now we have a series of opportunities to do the same thing at the federal level, both through executive action, through the Department of Energy, through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, and then potentially through legislation. On the human side of that, we have been working also for a really long time to do similar work to make sure that as coal plants come offline, there is an opportunity for communities, for the workers who work there, to transition to other jobs. So we are negotiating through our litigation, we negotiate for retirement agreements or settlement agreements between that to make sure that utilities are taking care of their workers where we have the standing to do that. One of the things that the Biden administration announced yesterday was a new task force led by the National Climate Advisor, Gina McCarthy, as well as the head of the National Economic Council, the director, Brian Deese, was a new commission to focus on coal and gas communities where we're getting off of coal and gas, to think through how do we transition those communities in a way that is just and fair and responsible. Knowing that we've relied on those communities to power our economy for more than a century, they should be carried into the economy of the next century. And so the Sierra Club will be putting resources into that, dedicating staff to that challenge, and making sure that the solutions we come up work for everybody.
Anything to add there, Melinda or Leslie?
I just want to lift up the work we're doing with the Blue Green Alliance with our labor partners. And a notion that Mike put forward in a meeting that, you know, if Biden can get it right in terms of pleasing both blue and green on infrastructure, that's really going to unlock the keys to the kingdom in terms of putting forward an infrastructure package that will help us address climate change, will help communities become resilient, which will provide real high-wage jobs. So the work that we are trying to do in partnership with the Blue-Green Alliance, I think is really vital and will be critical to as we engage in lobbying on infrastructure in the 117th Congress.
So folks, we've got about 10 minutes left. Thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for your attention today. I just want to call out the fact there's been so many really wonderful questions about either local issues or regional issues. And I've kept a lot of stuff more at the national level. If you're committed to protecting the San Juan Islands here in Washington State, we saw a question about policies in Massachusetts. We saw a lot of stuff around food and ag. The best thing to do is to connect with your local chapter. There are 65 Sierra Club chapters across the US and in Puerto Rico. And they're the ones who are working on the ground, bioregionally, in their states, in their communities. So go on to sierraclub.org, find your local chapter. Your local chapter are the best folks who are engaged in those local and regional initiatives. So please plug in with them. So we got about 10 minutes left, and I'd just love to hear some final last words from the three of you. And I think kind of on the question of how do we make this work, as somebody put it, like, yes, Biden's here for 4 years, but we don't know what happens after year 4, right? And how do we make sure that we're making lasting change? Either I think legislatively, or as someone sort of put it, changing the culture, changing the culture of this country and how we value places and people. So any last words on kind of looking beyond in the middle horizon, how we make sure that any gains that we've made this week and are making in the months to come are really lasting and permanent?
I'll start. I am looking at this as a 12-year project. All right. So we have this term, and then we're going to have 2 more, at least. All right. And in order to do that, we have to we have to make sure that we are in good allyship and partnership and comradeship with these communities who have been disproportionately affected, which we do have a good track record on, and that recognizing and that being in solidarity, that our liberation is also tied to their liberation, and being in solidarity on common issues, particularly around voting rights and democracy. And the same people who are deprived of their voting rights, who are intimidated by voting, are the same people who are disproportionately affected by pollution. These are the same people who, the same polluters who are bedeviling these communities and bedeviling all of us, are also funding militarized police. We have that research now. They're funding, the same polluters are funding police foundations. And so all these things are connected, and that we're all connected together. And so we find good balance in our lives and keep this momentum going where we're working with so many different kinds of people that I think we were going to prevail, and we're going to have the kind of world that we want to see. But everybody did their part this past cycle. I mean, it was a huge stress test. So community folks, kids, professionals, judges, electors, canvassers, everybody held and did their part, and we prevailed. But it's slim, and it can be, we can regress, and so we have to stay vigilant. But we also have to have fun. This is joyous work, it's really important. And so I'm so glad that there's so many people engaged on this level, and thank you all very much for all of your engagement and the hard work, for many of you all for decades. Thank you.
I'll let Mike close it out. Just a quick note from my perch in Washington. might be shorter term. I'm really looking forward to two fights. One is HR 1 and the kind of democracy reforms being put in place, or that can be put in place, in terms of expanding and protecting the vote, getting dirty money out of politics. If we can enact some of those reforms, that will have some lasting impact across the country. So I'm very excited about that. I'm also excited about the infrastructure, I'll call it the green infrastructure package put forward in the Build Back Better proposal under President Biden, just redirecting investments and putting money to do good by the climate, to do good by communities, and to do good by people. Everybody likes pork. I am very hopeful. I am hopeful that we will be able to move some of these investments, these bold investments, these directed investments in the 170th, and that too can have lasting value.
You know, when we do a survey of our staff or often our volunteers, and we ask them what they like most about volunteering or working with the Sierra Club, they almost always say the people. And one of the reasons why I like getting on these calls is because we get a chance to show some of the people inside the Sierra Club and how they think and what they do and what they're prioritizing. I think what you just heard over the last hour and over the last few minutes, you know, really illustrates some of the best ideas that we have. And particularly what Leslie and Melinda just shared about our 12-year vision or longer, and the short-term priorities reflects, I think, the nature of our challenge right now, in that when we see an opportunity to lock in and end, for example, to fossil fuel leasing for all fossil fuels on public lands, we're going to go for it. And we're going to try to get that, put it in place, because we know it'll help almost all of the challenges that we have, or to pass legislation that will expand infrastructure, some of the other things that Melinda was saying. So we are constantly scouting for opportunities at the state level as well as the federal level, particularly federally right now, to do something big and to get some big wins. And we know that even though this year is unique, maybe historically unique, where we have some opportunities to achieve a bunch of things that are great, we know that we have to build power. We've got to deepen our relationships. We have to strengthen our network. We have to help support other organizations so that they can become stronger to achieve the things that we need to achieve over the next decade or more. That's a lot. That's at the heart of our own internal commitment to be more fair and more just and more equitable, more racially diverse, and to change how we set up our systems, how we hire people, train people, support and elevate new leaders. And it's at the heart of the work that we're doing, even in our political program or in our external allies, to make sure that we're building power so that we can achieve more justice for more people. And we are clear-minded about the long-term nature of that work. So that's part of the joy and part of the challenge of doing this work, is to make sure that we have our eye on the opportunities that are right in front of us, that are just out of reach, but that could be within reach with stronger work, as well as the long-term challenges that we face.
Well, thank you so much, Mike and Melinda and Leslie, for sharing all you did today, sharing all of your intelligence and wisdom, and most of all, your passion. I certainly found it inspiring, and I'll take some of that inspiration with me, and I hope all of you listening will as well. Again, we couldn't cover everything. There's so much work to be done, but just stay tuned. This is just the first forum of the year. This was kind of the view from 30,000 feet. We'll have other forums coming up pretty shortly in the coming months that will be on kind of more specific topics and issues. So stay tuned for those. As always, you can find us online all the time at sierraclub.org, on Facebook and Instagram and all the usual social media channels. And as I said, one of the best ways that you can get engaged with the Sierra Club is through your local chapter or local groups, to be making change in your own community at the grassroots, and knowing that that will percolate up to national change, international change. So thanks y'all, and go safe and take care.
Bye everybody, thank you.